Oh, hey, it's you guys. What's going on? Welcome to the first episode of Community Synopsis, the series of YouTube videos where I give you, yes, you, a general analysis and some extra tidbits about various online communities. Let's get right into it. Let's go into the office. Oh, geez, just in time. Whiteboard's still empty. Let's get right into it. Okay, this should be the flow of the video.
Now, of course, we just have laid out the foundation. We're not actually done yet. Let's bullet point some shit that we're actually going to talk about.
Masturbate to cartoons.
Whoa. Why is this green screen in the way? Why is the camera so low? What the? Did you guys do this? Come on, man. It's only been a minute since the video started. All right, I guess I'm gonna punish you guys by having my JPEG tuber retard alter ego come in. So you guys did this to yourselves. Remember that.
Alright, now that fucker's out of here, let's get into the meat of the video. Now, as one does when explaining things, we've got to lay out the foundation with some backstory. Let's start off with beginnings/general history. So I know I have very shit handwriting, so I'm going to read off what each bullet point says real quick. First one is Protocell era, the second one is 1700s to now, and the third is modern era, and fourth is alt.support.shyness, which is a very specific website that I will introduce in a second. So pretty much, there is a timeline for the incel community. It starts in the 1700s, but even from the 1700s all the way up to about 1988, it's still kind of the protocell era, because there's no community that is formed around involuntary celibacy. Right. But in the 1700s, that's when the term actually first, kind of got thrown around a little bit in works of literature. But still, there was no community. That was just the building blocks. But now the protocell era specifically is where you get to see a lot of prominent historical figures such as Beethoven, Nikola Tesla, Lovecraft, and many more. You get to see their lives documented via, works of literature and things like that. And you see that they technically fall within the spectrum of inceldom. And so that's why there are whole little pages dedicated to these kind of people. There's even one on Hitler. So yeah. But back to the actual timeline. If we zoom in here, 1700s, right? You see the little works of literature and everything. But if you go all the way down, 1988, that's where the specific website alt.support.shyness kind of spawned. That's when the news group was a thing, and that kind of sparked the advent of internet forums and more people talking about involuntary celibacy. Virginity was on the rise and things like that. Let's jump into the stereotypical view. Pretty much, to sum it all up in one coherent sentence, the stereotypical view on incels and those that inhabit the incel community is that they are all a mix of coomers, hate-filled delusional psychopaths, Joker-esque villains who commit hate crimes against women, and just generally insane individuals or those that are just locked up in a little echo chamber of sorts, and they're kind of the cause of their own suffering. It's all about their personality and everything. And of course, there's always little truth in stereotypes, and so, there probably is a bit of truth there. And also, they're all ugly as shit. That's another one. And so that's another reason. They just can't cope well, right? They can't compensate well. And this is kind of perpetuated by what a lot of incels and people kind of quote-unquote red-pilled would call the blue pill mindset, which is something that is, been perpetuated by the media and unfavorable attention that is given to quote-unquote one-off instances like the mass murders and shooters like Elliot Rodger and people like that, right? And there's little pages dedicated to them. They kind of have a slightly sympathetic stance on it. It's not like they're sympathetic about the crimes, or it's more so like they're a product of their environment. And there's a vocal minority of misogynists, or at least that's what they kind of say. There's a lot of closed-minded individuals. That's another sort of stereotype. The general stereotype states that most of them, just about every single incel, is a raging misogynist and wants all women dead. All right, now let's move on to prominent events and then, term/lexicon. So arguably one of the biggest events that kind of really put Inceldom out into the public was several psychological studies and analyses being published, specifically a psychology dissertation titled "Are Singles Different from the Others? A Comparison of Singles and Couples," which focuses on the exploration of involuntary singles. And this was published by some dude with a very let's just say Germanic last name. And that was one of the biggest things, it really put it out there on the internet, put it out there. And I think that's one reason why the community is kind of tied to the psychological community of sorts and the sort of philosophical community as well, is because of all these little publications and studies that have been done. And a lot of people kind of use that and are like, oh, maybe this is why I'm single, right? Now, anyway, another very big prominent event was the advent of R9K, right? A specific board. It was put on in 2008, and the psychological study was published in 2000. So, there's an 8-year gap, but it's still, in the grand scheme of things, isn't a huge gap. Now, the thing about R9K is that it's considered a pseudo-incel sphere board because of the fact that it doesn't necessarily outright affiliate itself with Inceldom, and there's a lot of people on there that hate the term incel and they don't want to refer to themselves as that. But nowadays it's a little different because I go on R9K and I see a lot of people that are like, well, this is why I'm an incel, right? But there's a lot of shit posting and trolling still. Hasn't changed too much, but it's definitely changed a lot since 2008. Now, in the 2010s, there was a rise in incel subreddits, and there was an increase in young male virgins, like statistically. After, 5 years later, you start to see a rise in incel YouTubers, such as Stardusk / The Thinking Ape, because that's what he's known as now, and Incel TV, right? Those are two prominent figures today, and there's a bunch more. Some of them sadly passed away and things like that. But then after 2015, early 2019, 2020, there was a deletion of a lot of the subreddits previously shown. A lot of the lists that I just kind of flashed up on screen, all of those have been deleted. So there's maybe 1 or 2 left. And what was really cool about this is that I was there to see this. Like, it was weird. I remember going on some of these subreddits and just, within a week or two, they got deleted. It was really weird. 2019 is where I started becoming a huge Reddit fan. I've been using Reddit since like 2017 occasionally, but 2019 is where I was like addicted to it pretty much. So I got to see all that happen. Let's move on to the terms/lexicon. This is my favorite part because this is actually how I got into the rabbit hole of doing research on this community. A lot of it relates to like forms of celibacy, neurodivergency, and there's terms for normals and females and all that stuff, right? For example, I'll just flash like a couple on screen. There's a ton of terms related to like why you're an incel, and there's different subterms. So for example, the main term is medcel, right, for someone who is a incel because of due to medical reasons. And then below that there is mental cell. You're still a med cell because of the fact that it's still related to medicine and things like that. And then below mental cell, there's a plethora of different names for specific neurological disorders, personality disorders, things like that, right? All very, very interesting. And there's a lot of different terms for the black pill ideology and, females and things like that. Let's just say there's a lot to sift through, and it's very interesting. I might link some little starter pages if you guys ever want to dive into it yourselves. But, I want to keep it kind of short. So let's move on. General community views. We'll break it down. We'll start with woman, we'll move on to race and racism, then we'll go on to society, Inceldom itself, and we'll just go on. Let's start off with woman. This is a very, very important one, and it's a little different with each individual, but community-wise, women are seen as kind of the rulers of society in a way, because they see society as somewhat gynocentric in terms of social success, and this is seen with like the legal system and general acceptance for things like mental illness, all that stuff, and being able to show more emotion. And then they see modern culture as kind of the enemy because it praises single motherhood, slut culture, all that stuff. The arguments that they kind of use to say that society is gynocentric, things like male suicide rate, again, the legal system and how it favors females, Twitter cancel culture, and how violence actually doesn't necessarily disproportionately affect females, which I think is kind of cool to see all that stuff. I really like how they just use a lot of statistics and things like that, at least on the wiki, and even on some of the forums. Because I had to go on some of the forums other than R9K, because that's considered a pseudo-incel sphere forum. It's really cool to see how people really dive into it. Of course, some of it is really hate-filled. Kind of sucks that they feel this way, a lot of these people. So now let's move on to race and racism. And this is another big thing that falls into the stereotypical thing where people think that all incels are just super hateful. And again, stereotypes always are somewhat true, and there definitely are a lot of people that are really hateful. But if I'm being honest, what the wiki says about race, I actually completely agree with, just based off of what I've seen. Pretty much the wiki states that racism is generally only found on like this decentralized forums, pseudo-incel forums like R9K, and it's generally humorous in nature, and most incels actually share a sense of camaraderie. In fact, there's a theory called Just Be White that says that being white is actually a huge advantage due to Eurocentric beauty standards and all that, especially in the West. It's a very diverse community, actually. I'll flash some graphs up on the screen. As you see, it's still like mostly white a lot of times in a lot of these forums, but it's still very diverse, and there's a sense of camaraderie there. Not all incels are white, school shooters and things like that. In fact, there was actually a mixed race guy that shot up a school. Yeah, it's a very diverse community for sure, which I find very interesting because a lot of people paint incels as super racist and sexist and all that stuff. And of course, there's always going to be those people. And again, I'm not condoning any of these ideas or anything. I'm just simply sharing the research. Now let's move on to society. As mentioned before with women and things like that, there's a general contempt due to like social platitudes, harsh treatment of men opening up and things like that, people with Asperger's and all that kind of stuff, right? They use male suicide rates to, again, justify certain things. It's all very interesting. That's kind of to sum things up really quick. Now, Inceldom itself, this is something that's a little more mixed, all of this stuff is very mixed. Some people see it as an unfair curse of sorts, and it's always about lookism and things like that, which is an idea that's all about just your physical phenotype, stature, and all these things, right? And the black pill mentality where it's like, why even try? Because I'm already fucked from birth. There's that whole sort of idea there. But then there's other people that are like, no, I may be an incel, but I'm still going to improve upon myself by going to the gym and doing all these things. Maybe I'll never get women, but at least I could succeed in other ways. So it's very mixed. Some people see it as a curse. Some people see it like, maybe this is my own fault. And it's very mixed, very mixed. But I do see more so of the sort of curse thing, or it's very neutral, where it's like, I happen to be an incel. Doesn't matter too much, right? Especially on forums like R9K and stuff. Now let's move on to misogyny. I didn't really add this in my little bullet point script, but this is something I feel like kind of needed to talk about because the Incel Wiki doesn't really talk about this too much. It talks about it in a sort of joking manner, but there definitely is like a lot of delusional people, a lot of misogyny and things like that on these forums. You gotta realize that a lot of these people, they don't necessarily want to kill women. Some of them want to make a huge change in society, but they want someone else to do it, right? They don't want all women to die or anything like that, but some people do have like a legit hatred towards women, and it's all sort of decentralized because there's a lot of people that praise women, they put them on a pedestal, and that's one reason why they are an incel and why they browse these forums and stuff. But it's not as prominent within these communities as people are led to believe. Yeah, it's very interesting for sure. And unfortunately, there's not necessarily a ton of people that glamorize the incel killers, but there are people that just don't do anything about it, or they have a sort of sympathetic view where it's like it's all environmental, right? But here's the thing though, a lot of the figureheads simply seek to outline the scientific black pill and why the world may work in a woman's favor. That's sort of the general community views. Now we are going to summarize the video. Let's try to do it all in one sentence here. To summarize, the incel community is a very diverse group of people in terms of individual life stories, beliefs, age, race, all that. But the community is also full of information-dense history, terminology, and there are some kind of cool yet slightly surprising ties to the psychological and general scientific community. And there's very, very good sourcing on things like Asperger's and like all the little pages dedicated to mental illness and things like that. There's a whole huge page on the scientific black pill. But then sometimes there is some odd sourcing, like Jordan Peterson and Hitler's IQ was sourced from Quora, of all places. I know if it's all you could find, just don't source it. Like, there's better places to look than Quora for an estimate of someone's IQ. But anyway, that was it for today's episode of Community Synopsis. I hope you guys enjoyed today's look into the incel community. Make sure you guys tell me what community you'd like me to talk about next, and I'll see you guys next time.